Captain Marcus Blackwood had served the Royal Guard of Eldoria for 15 years, and never once had he questioned an order from the royal family. His loyalty was absolute, his dedication unwavering, and his reputation spotless. But as he stood outside the ornate doors of the Queen Consort's private chambers, his jaw clenched tight with barely contained fury, Marcus knew that today would change everything. The morning had started like any other in the grand palace of Eldoria. The autumn sun cast golden rays through the massive stained glass windows, painting the marble floors in brilliant colors. Marcus had been reviewing the security protocols for Princess Isabella's upcoming 10th birthday celebration when Lady Evelyn Ashworth, the Queen Consort, summoned him to her chambers. Lady Evelyn had married King Theodore 3 years ago, after the tragic death of Queen Helena in a riding accident. While the people of Eldoria had eventually accepted her, there was always an underlying tension in the palace. She was ambitious, calculating, and had very different ideas about how the kingdom should be run. More importantly, she had never formed a close bond with Princess Isabella, the king's daughter from his first marriage. Princess Isabella was the light of the palace. With her mother's gentle spirit and her father's determination, she had won the hearts of everyone who worked there. The staff adored her kindness, the guards respected her courage, and Marcus had developed an almost fatherly affection for the young princess. He had been assigned as her personal security detail 2 years ago and had watched her grow from a grieving 8-year-old into a bright, curious child who brought joy wherever she went. When Marcus entered Lady Evelyn's chambers, he immediately sensed the tension in the air. The Queen Consort was pacing behind her ornate desk, her silk gown rustling with each sharp turn. Her dark hair was pulled back severely, and her green eyes flashed with irritation. "Captain Blackwood," she said without looking at him, "I've called you here to discuss Princess Isabella's security arrangements." "Of course, Your Majesty. What concerns do you have?" Marcus replied, maintaining his professional composure despite the ice in her voice. Lady Evelyn finally stopped pacing and fixed him with a cold stare. "I've been observing the princess's behavior lately, and I'm concerned about the influence certain members of the palace staff are having on her." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine, but he kept his expression neutral. "Could you be more specific, Your Majesty? The princess has become increasingly defiant lately. She questions my authority, she challenges my decisions regarding palace protocol, and she shows a disturbing lack of respect for my position as Queen Consort." Lady Evelyn's voice grew sharper with each word. "I believe this behavior stems from the excessive familiarity she's developed with certain guards and servants who have forgotten their place." The accusation hit Marcus like a physical blow. He had always maintained proper protocol with Princess Isabella, but it was true that their relationship had grown warm over the years. She often sought his advice, shared her concerns about palace life, and looked to him for comfort when she missed her mother. But Marcus had never encouraged disrespect toward anyone in the royal family. "Your Majesty, I can assure you that Princess Isabella has always been taught to respect all members of the royal family," Marcus said carefully. "If there have been any incidents of disrespect, perhaps there's been a misunderstanding." Lady Evelyn's laugh was cold and humorless. "A misunderstanding? Captain, the princess openly contradicted me yesterday in front of the entire court when I suggested changes to the memorial garden dedicated to her mother. She claimed that I had no right to alter something so sacred. Those are not the words of a properly guided child." Marcus felt his anger beginning to simmer beneath the surface. The memorial garden had been Princess Isabella's idea, a beautiful tribute to Queen Helena that had brought comfort to both the princess and the king. The idea that Lady Evelyn would want to change it, and then blame Isabella for defending it, seemed cruel beyond measure. "Your Majesty," Marcus said, struggling to keep his voice steady, "the memorial garden holds deep sentimental value for Princess Isabella. Perhaps her reaction was simply that of a daughter protecting her mother's memory. "Don't lecture me about the princess's emotions, Captain," Lady Evelyn snapped, her composure finally cracking. "I am her stepmother, and I know what's best for her development. The problem is that she's been coddled and indulged by staff members who think they know better than I do." The room fell silent, except for the ticking of an ornate clock on the mantelpiece. Marcus could feel his heart pounding as he realized where this conversation was heading. Lady Evelyn walked to the window and gazed out at the palace gardens, her reflection ghost-like in the glass. "I've made a decision," she said finally. "I want you to reduce your interactions with Princess Isabella to the bare minimum required for security purposes. No more friendly conversations, no more personal advice, no more acting like a substitute father figure. The princess needs to learn that her loyalty should be to the crown, not to individual members of the staff." Marcus felt as though the ground had shifted beneath his feet. Lady Evelyn was essentially asking him to abandon Princess Isabella emotionally, to become nothing more than a cold, distant guardian. The thought of seeing the confusion and hurt in the young princess's eyes when he suddenly became distant made his stomach churn. "Your Majesty," he said slowly. "With respect, Princess Isabella has already experienced significant loss in her young life. She needs stability and trusted figures around her. Suddenly changing the dynamics of her relationships could be harmful to her emotional well-being." Lady Evelyn whirled around, her green eyes blazing with fury. "Are you questioning my judgment, Captain? Are you suggesting that I don't have the princess's best interests at heart?" "Not at all, Your Majesty. I'm simply offering my perspective as someone who has observed the princess closely for the past 2 years." Marcus's voice remained calm, but inside he was seething. The idea that this woman, who had shown little genuine affection for Isabella, would dictate how others should care for her was infuriating. "Your perspective is noted and dismissed," Lady Evelyn said icily. "You will follow my instructions regarding the princess, and that's final. Furthermore, I want you to report to me any conversations you have with her that go beyond basic security matters. I need to know if she's expressing any concerning thoughts or attitudes." The request hit Marcus like a slap across the face. Lady Evelyn was asking him to spy on Princess Isabella, to betray the trust of a child who had already endured so much. The very suggestion made him feel sick. "Your Majesty," Marcus said, his voice beginning to shake with barely controlled emotion, "I cannot and will not spy on Princess Isabella. My duty is to protect her, not to monitor her private thoughts and feelings for the purpose of reporting them to others." Lady Evelyn's face flushed with rage. "How dare you refuse a direct order from a member of the royal family? You forget yourself, Captain Blackwood. You are a servant of this crown, nothing more. You don't get to decide which orders you'll follow based on your personal feelings." "I am a servant of the crown," Marcus replied, his own anger finally beginning to surface. "But I am also a human being with a conscience. I will not participate in anything that could harm Princess Isabella's emotional well-being or violate her trust." The two stared at each other in tense silence, the air crackling with hostility. Lady Evelyn's chest rose and fell rapidly as she struggled to contain her fury, while Marcus stood rigid. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. "You are walking a very dangerous line, Captain," Lady Evelyn said in a voice barely above a whisper. "I could have you dismissed from your position immediately. I could ensure that you never work in palace security again. Is protecting the princess's feelings really worth destroying your entire career?" Marcus felt a moment of doubt flicker through his mind. He had devoted his life to serving the crown, and the thought of losing everything he had worked for was terrifying. But then he thought of Princess Isabella's bright smile, her innocent trust, her need for stability in a world that had already taken so much from her. The choice became clear. "Yes," he said simply. "It is." Lady Evelyn's face went white with shock and rage. For a moment, Marcus thought she might actually strike him. Instead, she walked to her desk and pulled out a piece of parchment, dipping her quill in ink with sharp, aggressive movements. "Very well, Captain Blackwood," she said as she began to write. "If you insist on defying my authority, then I'll take this matter directly to the king. We'll see how he feels about his head of security refusing to follow orders from his wife." Marcus felt a chill of fear run through him. King Theodore loved his daughter deeply, but he also relied heavily on Lady Evelyn's counsel in matters of palace administration. If she presented the situation in the right way, she could easily make Marcus look like an insubordinate guard who had overstepped his boundaries. But even as fear gnawed at him, Marcus knew he couldn't back down now. Princess Isabella deserved to have at least one person in the palace who would stand up for her, even if it cost him everything. "Do what you feel you must, Your Majesty," Marcus said quietly. "But I will not change my position on this matter." Lady Evelyn finished writing and looked up at him with a smile that was more predatory than pleasant. "Oh, I intend to. And, Captain, when the king hears about your insubordination, I doubt you'll be quite so confident about your noble principles." Marcus bowed stiffly and turned to leave, but Lady Evelyn's voice stopped him at the door. "One more thing, Captain. Until this matter is resolved, you are to have no contact with Princess Isabella whatsoever. I'm assigning Captain Morrison to take over her security detail immediately." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Captain Morrison was competent enough, but he was cold and distant, caring more about protocol than about the people he protected. The thought of Princess Isabella being left without anyone who truly cared about her welfare made Marcus's heart ache. "Your Majesty," he began, but Lady Evelyn cut him off. "The discussion is over, Captain. You may go." Marcus left the Queen Consort's chambers feeling as though the world had tilted off its axis. In the span of one conversation, he had gone from being a trusted member of the Royal Guard to being potentially unemployed and certainly banned from seeing the princess he had sworn to protect. As he walked through the marble corridors, Marcus noticed the concerned glances from other staff members. News traveled fast in the palace, and he suspected that word of his confrontation with Lady Evelyn would spread quickly. He made his way to his small office in the guard quarters, where he found Captain Morrison waiting for him with an uncomfortable expression on his weathered face. "Marcus," Morrison said quietly, "I've been told about the reassignment. I want you to know that I didn't ask for this." "I know you didn't, James," Marcus replied, sinking into his chair. "You're a good man, and I trust you to keep the princess safe. But please, try to remember that she's just a child who's been through a great deal. She needs kindness, not just protection." Morrison nodded solemnly. "I'll do my best. But Marcus, what were you thinking? Taking on the Queen Consort like that? You must have known it would end badly." Marcus stared out the small window of his office. Watching the gardeners tend to the memorial garden that had started this whole mess. "I was thinking about a 10-year-old girl who's already lost her mother, and who deserves to have someone in this palace who puts her well-being above politics. And now she doesn't have you either," Morrison pointed out gently. The truth of those words cut deep. In trying to protect Princess Isabella, Marcus had ended up being removed from her life entirely. He wondered if he had made the right choice, or if he had simply let his emotions cloud his judgment. A soft knock on the door interrupted his brooding. A young page entered nervously, carrying a sealed letter bearing the royal seal. "Captain Blackwood," the page said in a trembling voice, "this is from His Majesty the King. He requests your immediate presence in the throne room." Marcus's heart sank as he broke the seal and read the brief message. King Theodore wanted to see him right away to discuss his concerning behavior toward the Queen Consort. Lady Evelyn had wasted no time in presenting her version of events. As Marcus made his way toward the throne room, he passed through the great hall where Princess Isabella's portrait hung alongside those of the previous monarchs. In the painting, she was smiling brightly, her mother's gentle eyes shining with happiness. Marcus paused for a moment, looking up at the image of the child he had sworn to protect. "I'm sorry, Princess," he whispered. "I hope someday you'll understand why I had to do this." The massive doors to the throne room loomed ahead, and Marcus steeled himself for what was likely to be the end of his career. But as he straightened his shoulders and prepared to face the king's judgment, he felt no regret for the choices he had made. Some principles were worth fighting for, even when the cost was higher than he had imagined. The throne room of Eldoria was a magnificent chamber that had witnessed centuries of royal decisions. Massive columns of white marble stretched toward a vaulted ceiling, painted with scenes of the kingdom's glorious history. At the far end, King Theodore sat upon the ancient golden throne, his usually kind face etched with concern and confusion. Marcus approached with measured steps, his boots echoing in the vast space. He had been in this room countless times for ceremonial occasions and security briefings, but never had it felt so imposing, so final. Lady Evelyn stood to the king's right, her expression carefully composed, but her eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "Your Majesty," Marcus said, bowing deeply as he reached the appropriate distance from the throne. King Theodore studied him for a long moment. At 42, the king still bore the handsome features that had once made him the most sought-after royal bachelor in Europe, but grief and the responsibilities of rule had etched lines of weariness around his blue eyes. His dark hair, now streaked with premature gray, was pulled back in a simple style that spoke to his preference for practicality over pomp. "Captain Blackwood," the king said finally, his voice heavy with disappointment. "Lady Evelyn has brought some very serious concerns to my attention. She tells me that you openly defied her authority and refused to follow direct orders regarding my daughter's security arrangements." Marcus felt his throat constrict, but he forced himself to speak clearly. "Your Majesty, I believe there may have been a misunderstanding about the nature of our discussion." Lady Evelyn stepped forward slightly. "There was no misunderstanding, my lord. Captain Blackwood was insubordinate and disrespectful. When I gave him clear instructions about maintaining proper boundaries with Princess Isabella, he refused to comply and had the audacity to question my judgment." King Theodore's frown deepened. "Is this true, Captain? Did you refuse to follow the Queen Consort's orders?" Marcus felt the weight of the moment pressing down upon him. He could lie, could soften the truth, could try to present his actions in a more favorable light. But looking into the king's eyes, he knew that only complete honesty would serve. "Yes, Your Majesty, I did refuse to follow certain orders, but I believe the context is important." Marcus straightened his shoulders. "Lady Evelyn asked me to distance myself emotionally from Princess Isabella and to report her private conversations to her. I felt that these requests could be harmful to the princess's well-being." "Harmful?" Lady Evelyn interjected, her voice rising slightly before she caught herself. "I was trying to ensure that Isabella develops appropriate relationships with palace staff. The child has become far too familiar with the servants, and it's affecting her behavior." King Theodore held up a hand for silence, his gaze shifting between his wife and his captain. "Captain Blackwood, you've been with my daughter for 2 years. In that time, I've seen her grow more confident, more secure. She trusts you, and that trust has been beneficial to her recovery after her mother's death." Marcus felt a flicker of hope, but Lady Evelyn's face had darkened ominously. "Theodore," she said carefully, "surely you can see that Isabella's attachment to Captain Blackwood has become unhealthy. She comes to him with problems instead of coming to us. She seeks his approval instead of ours. This undermines our authority as her parents." The word parents hung in the air like a challenge. King Theodore's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, and Marcus could see the internal struggle playing out on the monarch's face. Theodore loved his daughter deeply, but he also needed harmony in his marriage and stability in his household. "Perhaps," the king said slowly, "we can find a middle ground here. Captain Blackwood, Lady Evelyn's concerns about appropriate boundaries are not unreasonable. As Isabella grows older, she will need to understand the proper relationships between royalty and staff." Marcus's heart sank, but he forced himself to nod. "I understand, Your Majesty. I have always tried to maintain appropriate respect while also providing the emotional support that any child needs." "The emotional support should come from her family," Lady Evelyn said firmly, "not from hired guards who forget their place in the hierarchy." The words stung, but Marcus bit back his response. He could see that King Theodore was wavering, torn between his wife's demands and his own observations of his daughter's well-being. "There's something else," Lady Evelyn continued, reaching into her silk purse and withdrawing a folded piece of paper. "This morning, after our discussion, I found this note from Isabella. It was apparently intended for Captain Blackwood." She handed the paper to the king, who unfolded it and read silently. Marcus watched as Theodore's expression shifted from confusion to concern to something that looked almost like pain. "What does it say?" Marcus asked, though he dreaded the answer. King Theodore cleared his throat and read aloud. "Dear Captain Marcus, Lady Evelyn told me I can't talk to you anymore except about security things. She says you've been a bad influence on me. But you're not bad. You're the only one who listens when I talk about Mama. Please don't let her send you away. I'll be good, I promise. Love, Isabella." The words hit Marcus like physical blows. Princess Isabella had somehow learned about the conflict and was blaming herself, promising to be good to keep him from being punished. The thought of that innocent child carrying such guilt made his chest ache. "You see?" Lady Evelyn said, her voice carefully modulated to sound reasonable rather than triumphant. "The princess is more attached to Captain Blackwood than is healthy. She's already learned about the situation and is choosing his side over her family's. This is exactly what I was trying to prevent." King Theodore stared at the letter for a long moment, his fingers tracing the childish handwriting. When he looked up, his eyes were filled with a sadness that made Marcus's heart break. "Isabella wrote this?" the king asked quietly. "I found it on her writing desk this morning," Lady Evelyn confirmed. "She was apparently planning to slip it to Captain Blackwood despite being told that their interactions should be limited to professional matters." Marcus wanted to defend Princess Isabella, to explain that her reaction showed not unhealthy attachment, but rather the natural response of a child who had found comfort and security in their relationship. But he could see that King Theodore was interpreting the letter as evidence of his daughter's divided loyalties. "Captain Blackwood," the king said finally, "I want you to understand that I don't question your dedication to my daughter's safety. You've served this family with honor and distinction. But perhaps Lady Evelyn is right that Isabella has become too dependent on you for emotional support." "Your Majesty," Marcus said desperately, "Princess Isabella has experienced tremendous loss. She needs stable relationships with people she trusts. If we suddenly remove that stability..." "Are you suggesting that the princess cannot find that stability within her own family?" Lady Evelyn interrupted, her voice sharp with offense. "Are you implying that her father and I are inadequate?" Marcus realized he had walked into a trap. Anything he said now could be interpreted as criticism of the royal family's parenting, which would be seen as unforgivable insubordination. "Not at all, Your Majesty," he said carefully. "I simply believe that children benefit from having multiple trusted adults in their lives, especially after experiencing trauma." King Theodore stood and walked to one of the tall windows overlooking the palace gardens. In the distance, Marcus could see the memorial garden, where Princess Isabella often went to remember her mother. The irony wasn't lost on him that the garden had sparked this entire crisis. "I've made my decision," the king said without turning around. "Captain Blackwood, you will be reassigned to General Palace Security effective immediately. Captain Morrison will continue as Isabella's primary guard. You are to limit your interactions with my daughter to emergency situations only." Marcus felt the world spinning around him. "Your Majesty, please reconsider. Princess Isabella will be confused and hurt by this sudden change. At least allow me to explain the situation to her properly." "Absolutely not," Lady Evelyn said quickly. "Any explanation you give will only reinforce her inappropriate attachment to you. She needs to learn that staff members are not permanent fixtures in her life." King Theodore turned back to face them, and Marcus was shocked to see tears in the monarch's eyes. "This is difficult for me as well, Captain. But I must think of what's best for Isabella in the long term. She cannot grow up believing that she can manipulate situations to get her way, even innocently." Marcus wanted to argue that Princess Isabella wasn't trying to manipulate anyone, that she was simply a scared child trying to preserve one of the few stable relationships in her life. But he could see that both the king and Lady Evelyn had already decided on their interpretation of events. "I understand, Your Majesty," Marcus said quietly, though understanding and accepting were two very different things. "Your new assignment will be announced this afternoon," King Theodore continued. "You'll be responsible for perimeter security and will report directly to Colonel Harrison. Your salary and rank will remain unchanged." It was a face-saving gesture, Marcus realized. King Theodore was trying to soften the blow by ensuring that the reassignment didn't look like a demotion to the other staff members. But Marcus barely heard the details through the roaring in his ears. "There is one more thing," Lady Evelyn said, her voice deceptively gentle. "Given the emotional nature of this situation, I think it would be best if Captain Blackwood took a few days of leave before beginning his new duties. Perhaps some time away from the palace would help everyone adjust to the new arrangements." Marcus understood the real meaning behind her words. She wanted him gone immediately, before he could have any contact with Princess Isabella that might contradict whatever explanation they planned to give her. "That's an excellent suggestion," King Theodore agreed, looking relieved to have found a way to make the transition easier. "Captain Blackwood, please take the rest of this week off. Report to Colonel Harrison on Monday morning for your new assignment briefing." Marcus nodded numbly. In the span of 2 hours, he had gone from being Princess Isabella's trusted protector to being effectively banished from her presence. The speed and finality of it all felt surreal. "Your Majesty," he said, making one last desperate attempt, "when Princess Isabella asks where I've gone, what will you tell her?" King Theodore exchanged a glance with Lady Evelyn before answering. "We'll tell her that you've been given new responsibilities that require your expertise elsewhere in the palace. She'll understand that sometimes adults have to make difficult decisions for the greater good." Marcus doubted that Princess Isabella would understand at all. More likely, she would blame herself for his disappearance, just as she had blamed herself for her mother's death in those terrible months after the accident. The thought of that bright, loving child withdrawing into herself again made Marcus feel physically ill. "If there's nothing else, Captain Blackwood—" "You're dismissed," Lady Evelyn said, her tone making it clear that she considered the matter closed. Marcus bowed one final time and turned to leave, his footsteps echoing hollowly in the vast chamber. As he reached the doors, King Theodore's voice stopped him. "Marcus," the king called, using his first name for the first time in their conversation. "I want you to know that this decision brings me no joy. You've been a good friend to my daughter, and I'll always be grateful for that." Marcus turned back, seeing the genuine anguish in Theodore's eyes. "I understand, Your Majesty. I hope Princess Isabella will be happy." As Marcus left the throne room, he caught sight of a small figure hiding behind one of the massive marble columns in the corridor. Princess Isabella stepped out slowly. Her young face streaked with tears and her usually perfect hair disheveled. She had been listening to the entire conversation. "Captain Marcus," she whispered, her voice breaking, "are you really leaving me?" Marcus's heart shattered. Every instinct screamed at him to go to her, to comfort her, to explain that none of this was her fault. But he could feel Lady Evelyn's eyes on him from the throne room doorway, and he knew that any gesture of comfort would only make things worse for the princess in the long run. "Princess Isabella," he said formally, his voice thick with emotion, "you should return to your chambers. This is not an appropriate place for you to be right now." The formality of his words hit her like a slap. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks as she realized that even now, in this moment of crisis, he was maintaining the professional distance that Lady Evelyn had demanded. "But I don't understand," Isabella said, her voice rising desperately. "What did I do wrong? Why is everyone angry with me?" Marcus closed his eyes briefly, fighting against every protective instinct he possessed. When he opened them again, he saw Lady Evelyn approaching with a cold smile. "Isabella, dear," Lady Evelyn said sweetly, "you shouldn't be wandering the corridors alone. Come, let's get you back to your rooms, and we'll have a nice chat about your new arrangements." Princess Isabella looked between Marcus and her stepmother, confusion and hurt warring on her young face. "I want to talk to Papa," she said stubbornly. "Your father is very busy with important matters," Lady Evelyn replied smoothly. "But I'll be happy to explain everything to you. Come along now." Marcus watched helplessly as Lady Evelyn placed a possessive hand on Princess Isabella's shoulder and began guiding her away. The princess looked back at him once, her eyes pleading for some sign that everything would be all right. But Marcus couldn't give her that reassurance, couldn't offer her the comfort she desperately needed. All he could do was stand there, watching the most important relationship of his career crumble into dust, knowing that he had lost far more than just a job assignment. He had lost the trust and friendship of a child who had needed him, and there was nothing he could do to fix it. As their footsteps faded down the corridor, Marcus realized that his fight to protect Princess Isabella had only succeeded in ensuring that she would face the future without him by her side. 3 weeks had passed since Marcus's banishment from Princess Isabella's life, and the palace felt like a different place entirely. The corridors that had once echoed with the princess's laughter now seemed subdued and gray. Staff members whispered in corners about the changes they had observed, and even the most loyal servants began to question the wisdom of Lady Evelyn's decisions. Marcus had returned to his new duties the previous Monday, assigned to patrol the outer walls and monitor the palace's perimeter security. It was important work, but it felt like exile. From his new post, he could sometimes catch glimpses of Princess Isabella in the gardens or at her bedroom window. But the distance between them might as well have been an ocean. Captain Morrison had done his best to fill the gap, but his reports to Marcus during their brief encounters painted a troubling picture. Princess Isabella had become withdrawn and quiet, no longer the vibrant child who had once brought joy to everyone around her. She completed her lessons dutifully, but without enthusiasm, ate her meals in silence, and spent long hours alone in the memorial garden dedicated to her mother. "She asks about you every day," Morrison confided during one of their clandestine conversations in the guard quarters. "Lady Evelyn keeps telling her that you're simply busy with new responsibilities, but Isabella isn't stupid. She knows something more significant has happened." Marcus felt his chest tighten with guilt and frustration. "How is she handling her lessons? Her social activities?" "She's going through the motions," Morrison replied grimly. "But there's no spark left in her. Yesterday, her tutor mentioned that she used to ask dozens of questions during history lessons, but now she just sits there passively, It's like watching a flower wilt. The description hit Marcus like a physical blow. One of the things he had most admired about Princess Isabella was her curious nature, her eagerness to learn about the world around her. The thought that this bright spark had been extinguished made him question every decision he had made. Meanwhile, Lady Evelyn seemed pleased with the results of her intervention. She had taken a more active role in Princess Isabella's daily routine, personally overseeing her lessons and social activities. To outside observers, it appeared that the queen consort was finally bonding with her stepdaughter. But those who knew Isabella well could see the truth beneath the surface. The turning point came on a gray Thursday afternoon when Marcus was conducting his usual perimeter inspection. He was checking the security of the garden gates when he heard a commotion from the direction of the memorial garden. Voices were raised in anger, and one of them belonged to Princess Isabella. Despite his explicit orders to avoid any contact with the princess, Marcus found himself moving toward the sound. His protective instincts, honed over 2 years of caring for Isabella, overrode all other considerations. As he approached the garden, he could see Lady Evelyn standing near the memorial fountain, her face flushed with rage, while Princess Isabella stood defiantly before her. "You will not speak to me in that tone, young lady," Lady Evelyn was saying, her voice sharp with authority. "I am your stepmother, and I demand respect." "You're not my mother," Isabella replied, her voice shaking but determined. "My mother would never try to destroy something beautiful just to prove she had power over it." Marcus crept closer, staying hidden behind a tall hedge. In the center of the garden stood the memorial fountain that Princess Isabella had designed in honor of Queen Helena. It was a beautiful piece, carved from white marble and surrounded by her mother's favorite flowers. But now Marcus could see that construction workers were standing nearby with tools, obviously preparing to make alterations. "The fountain is being relocated to a more appropriate spot," Lady Evelyn said coldly. "This garden needs to serve the entire royal family, not just be a shrine to the past." "Papa said I could keep it here always," Isabella protested, tears streaming down her face. "He promised when Mama died that her memory would always have a place in our home." "Your father has many responsibilities, and sometimes promises must be adjusted for practical reasons," Lady Evelyn replied dismissively. "You're old enough now to understand that the world doesn't revolve around your feelings." Marcus watched as Princess Isabella's small frame shook with emotion. The cruelty of Lady Evelyn's words, delivered so casually, made his blood boil. He could see that this wasn't really about the fountain at all. It was about asserting dominance, about erasing the last traces of Queen Helena's influence in the palace. "I won't let you do this," Isabella said, stepping in front of the fountain as if her small body could protect it from destruction. "I'll tell Papa what you're really doing." Lady Evelyn's laugh was cold and calculating. "Your father is in meetings with the finance ministry all day. By the time he returns, the relocation will be complete. Sometimes, Isabella, adults have to make difficult decisions that children cannot understand." "I understand more than you think," Isabella shot back, her voice gaining strength despite her tears. "I understand that you've never liked having reminders of my real mother around. I understand that you sent Captain Marcus away because he cared about me and you don't. And I understand that you think if you can control everything around me, you can control me too." The directness and accuracy of the princess's words clearly shocked Lady Evelyn. For a moment her composed mask slipped, revealing the calculating ambition beneath. "How dare you speak to me that way?" she hissed. "You ungrateful little—" She stopped herself, but the venom in her voice was unmistakable. Princess Isabella stepped back, suddenly looking very young and very frightened. Marcus couldn't stand by any longer. His duty as a royal guard might have been redefined, but his duty as a human being was clear. He stepped out from behind the hedge, his presence immediately commanding attention. "Your Majesty," he said formally, bowing to Lady Evelyn while his eyes remained fixed on Princess Isabella's tear-stained face. "I was conducting my security rounds when I heard raised voices." "Is everything all right?" Lady Evelyn's face went white with fury. "Captain Blackwood, you have no business being in this area. Your duties are strictly perimeter security." "The memorial garden is part of the palace grounds," Marcus replied evenly. "Ensuring its security falls within my responsibilities." It was a thin excuse, and they all knew it, but Marcus didn't care. Princess Isabella was looking at him with such relief and hope that he would have faced down an army to protect her. "Captain Marcus," Isabella said, her voice small but brave. "Lady Evelyn is trying to move Mama's fountain. She says Papa agreed, but I don't think he knows what she's really doing." Marcus looked at the construction workers, then at the fountain, then back at Lady Evelyn. "I wasn't aware that any changes to the memorial garden had been approved through the proper security channels. Any alterations to significant monuments require additional safety protocols." It was bureaucratic nonsense, but it was also technically correct. Lady Evelyn's eyes narrowed as she realized that Marcus was using palace procedure to delay her plans. "The work has been properly authorized," she said through gritted teeth. "Your approval is not required." "Perhaps not," Marcus agreed. "But if there's any question about the authorization, I believe the work should be postponed until King Theodore can personally confirm the orders." "I'm sure you understand my position, Your Majesty. The security of the royal family must take precedence over construction schedules." The standoff stretched between them, with Princess Isabella looking hopefully between Marcus and Lady Evelyn. Finally, Lady Evelyn realized that she had been outmaneuvered, at least temporarily. "Very well," she said icily. "We'll postpone the work until this evening. I'll speak to the king personally about this matter." She turned to Isabella with a cold smile. "And we'll also be discussing your behavior, young lady. Your father needs to know how disrespectful you've become." Lady Evelyn swept away with her entourage, leaving Marcus alone with Princess Isabella for the first time in 3 weeks. The princess looked up at him with eyes full of gratitude and confusion. "Captain Marcus," she whispered, "I've missed you so much. Why won't anyone tell me what really happened? Why can't we be friends anymore?" Marcus knelt down to her level, his heart breaking at the pain in her young face. "Princess Isabella, I want you to know that nothing that has happened is your fault. Sometimes adults make decisions that are hard to understand, but those decisions aren't a reflection of what you've done wrong." "But I must have done something," Isabella insisted. "Lady Evelyn said I was too familiar with the servants, that I didn't know my place. Maybe if I hadn't written you that note—" "No," Marcus said firmly, reaching out instinctively to take her hands before catching himself and pulling back. "Isabella, listen to me carefully. You did nothing wrong. You are a kind, intelligent, wonderful young woman, and anyone who tells you otherwise is mistaken." Tears began flowing down Isabella's cheeks again. "But if I didn't do anything wrong, why did you leave me? Why won't you talk to me anymore?" The question pierced Marcus's heart. How could he explain palace politics and adult jealousies to a 10-year-old child? How could he make her understand that sometimes good people were forced to make choices that hurt the people they cared about most? "Sometimes," Marcus said carefully, "people in positions of authority make decisions that they believe are best, even when those decisions cause pain. I didn't leave you because I wanted to, Princess. I was ordered to stay away because some people thought our friendship was inappropriate." "But it wasn't inappropriate," Isabella protested. "You were kind to me when I was sad. You listened when I talked about Mama. You made me feel safe. How can that be wrong?" Marcus felt tears prick his own eyes. "It's not wrong, Isabella. What we had was special and important, and I will always treasure our friendship. But sometimes special things come to an end, not because they weren't good, but because the world around them changes. They stood together in the memorial garden, surrounded by the flowers that Queen Helena had loved, while the fountain that Isabella had designed sparkled in the afternoon sunlight. It was a moment of perfect clarity in the midst of all the palace's confusion and politics. "I have an idea," Marcus said suddenly. "I can't be your personal guard anymore, and I can't spend time with you the way we used to. But there might be a way for me to help you without anyone being able to object." Isabella looked up hopefully. "What do you mean?" Marcus glanced around to make sure they were still alone. "I've been thinking about your situation. And I believe you need someone who can advise you about palace politics, someone who understands how this place really works. What if I could arrange for you to meet with someone who could teach you how to navigate these complicated relationships?" "Like who?" "Lady Margaret," Marcus said thoughtfully. "She served as governess to your grandmother, and she still lives in the palace. She's old enough that no one would question her spending time with you, and she's wise enough to help you understand how to handle situations like this." Princess Isabella considered this for a moment. "Would you ask her for me?" "I will," Marcus promised. "And Isabella, I want you to remember something important. No matter what happens, no matter what anyone tells you, you are loved. Your father loves you, even when he makes decisions you don't understand. And there are people in this palace who care about your happiness, even if they can't always show it openly." Before Isabella could respond, they heard footsteps approaching. Captain Morrison appeared around the corner, his face tense with worry. "Princess Isabella," he said formally, "Lady Evelyn is looking for you. She wants you to return to your chambers immediately." Isabella looked at Marcus one more time, her eyes bright with unshed tears, but also with something that hadn't been there for weeks: hope. "Thank you, Captain Marcus," she said quietly, "for everything." As Morrison escorted her away, Marcus remained in the memorial garden, looking at Queen Helena's fountain and thinking about the complex web of loyalty, duty, and love that governed life in the palace. He had lost his position as Isabella's protector, but perhaps he could still find ways to help her navigate the challenges ahead. That evening, Marcus made his way to Lady Margaret's chambers in the East Wing. The elderly woman listened carefully as he explained the situation, her wise eyes growing sad as she understood the full scope of what Princess Isabella was facing. "Of course I'll help her," Lady Margaret said without hesitation. "That poor child has already endured so much loss. Lady Evelyn may have won this battle, but Isabella's education in palace politics is just beginning. And Marcus," she added with a knowing smile, "don't think that your role in her life is over. Sometimes the most important protectors are the ones who work behind the scenes." As Marcus left Lady Margaret's chambers, he felt something he hadn't experienced in weeks: hope. Princess Isabella might have lost her official protector, but she was gaining something perhaps even more valuable: the knowledge and allies she would need to survive and thrive in the complex world of royal politics. The game was far from over, and Marcus was determined to ensure that when the final moves were played, Princess Isabella would be strong enough to protect herself and preserve the memory of her mother's love. Lady Evelyn might have won the immediate conflict, but the war for Isabella's future was just beginning, and Marcus intended to make sure the princess had every advantage she would need to emerge victorious.